Los Angeles was burning. The wildfire spared nothing except one building. An Islamic Madrasa surrounded by flames stood untouched. What happened here? Was it faith, coincidence, or something beyond human understanding? Wildfires are merciless, consuming everything in their path. But amidst one of the largest wildfires in Los Angeles history, something unexplainable occurred. A building where prayers echoed moments before disaster struck emerged unscathed while the city around it turned to ash. This is the story of a miracle witnessed by firefighters, skeptics, and believers alike. A story that challenges logic and renews faith. The wildfires tearing through Los Angeles were unlike anything the city had ever seen. Fueled by dry winds and record-high temperatures, the inferno swept across neighborhoods, leaving devastation in its wake. Emergency services were stretched thin, struggling to contain the flames that seemed to grow stronger by the hour. Families fled their homes, watching helplessly as decades of memories went up in smoke. Entire blocks were reduced to ash in mere moments, and the air was thick with the acrid scent of destruction. For veteran firefighter Williams, this was one of the toughest challenges of his career. He had fought fires his whole life, but nothing could prepare him for the scale and ferocity of this one. "We were outnumbered," he would later say, describing the hopelessness that hung in the air as he and his team battled to keep the fire from spreading further. The flames were relentless, swallowing everything in their path: homes, businesses, even historic landmarks. Amidst this chaos stood the Islamic Madrasa, a modest building that served as both a school and a place of worship. It was a cornerstone for the local Muslim community, a sanctuary for education and prayer. But as the flames drew closer, the fate of the madrasa seemed sealed. Inside the madrasa, Imam Ahmed gathered his small congregation. The fire was approaching rapidly, and they all knew the odds were against them. The imam could hear the crackle of flames growing louder with each passing moment, the heat seeping through the walls. He faced a decision no leader wants to make: attempt an escape with his congregation through a city engulfed in fire, or stay and pray for protection. Imam Ahmed chose faith. He urged his congregation to stay calm and join him in prayer, seeking protection from Allah. For those inside, the atmosphere was a mix of fear and hope. Parents clutched their children tightly, their whispered prayers mingling with the imam's steady voice as he recited verses from the Quran. Outside, the fire continued its rampage, drawing closer with every second. Neighbors watched helplessly as the flames encircled the madrasa, expecting it to be consumed like everything else. "It's just a matter of time," one resident muttered, tears in his eyes. Melissa, a journalist known for her sharp skepticism, had been sent to cover the wildfire. For her, it was another story of tragedy and loss, one she thought she could write without much thought. But when she heard about the madrasa, she grew curious. How would the building, its wooden frame no match for the fire's intensity, possibly survive? As firefighters scrambled to contain the flames and the community braced for the worst, the madrasa became the center of attention. Everyone, firefighters, locals, and even the media, expected to see it engulfed in flames. But what happened next would defy every prediction and challenge every assumption. The stage was set for something extraordinary, but at that moment, all anyone could see was the overwhelming challenge: an unstoppable fire, a fragile building, and a small group of people placing their fate in something far greater than themselves. The fire burned with a relentless fury, moving like a living entity intent on consuming everything in its path. Witnesses described how the flames licked at the walls of the madrasa, yet never seemed to penetrate its boundary. From above, aerial footage showed a stark contrast. The madrasa, serene and untouched, stood in the center of a charred and smoldering neighborhood. For the firefighters, this was beyond baffling. It was something they had never encountered before. Williams, a seasoned firefighter with over 20 years of experience, approached the madrasa cautiously. His team had seen their share of tragedies: homes incinerated in minutes, entire families displaced. They had come prepared for devastation, but were instead greeted by an anomaly. "It doesn't make sense," Williams muttered to himself as he inspected the untouched structure. Around him, the ground was scorched, trees were reduced to skeletal remains, and the air was thick with ash. But the madrasa's walls stood white and pristine, as if the fire had simply refused to touch them. Inside the building, Imam Ahmed and his congregation were still deep in prayer. According to those present, the group had gathered as soon as the fire alarm sounded in the area. They knew the fire was approaching and that their chances of escape were slim. But instead of succumbing to panic, they turned to their faith, reciting verses from the Quran and calling upon Allah for protection. When Melissa, the journalist assigned to cover the wildfire, heard about the madrasa's survival, she was intrigued. At first, she dismissed it as a coincidence or a quirk of nature. Sometimes fires jump buildings or take strange paths, she told herself. But as she interviewed more witnesses, she realized this was no ordinary story. Melissa began by speaking with the locals who had gathered near the madrasa. One elderly man, tears streaming down his face, described the moment he thought the madrasa would be consumed. "The flames were so close," he said, his voice trembling. "I thought it was gone, but then nothing happened. It was like an invisible wall stopped the fire." Another witness, a young mother, described a strange glow she saw surrounding the madrasa during the height of the blaze. "It wasn't just the firelight," she insisted. "It was something else, like a protective aura. I can't explain it, but I know what I saw." Williams, meanwhile, continued to grapple with the scene. As someone who prided himself on understanding fire behavior, he found himself at a loss. "Fires don't just stop like that," he explained to Melissa. "There are factors, wind, moisture, fuel sources, but this wasn't normal." Melissa's investigation led her to speak with the firefighters who had been closest to the scene. They shared similar accounts of the fire's strange behavior around the madrasa. One firefighter described how the flames seemed to retreat as they approached the building. Another recalled how the temperature near the madrasa was significantly cooler than expected, despite the inferno raging just a few feet away. Determined to find a logical explanation, Melissa turned to experts. She contacted fire behavior analysts, asking if there was any natural phenomenon that could account for what had happened. Some suggested that a sudden shift in wind or a unique humidity pocket might have created a protective barrier. But when she presented the footage and witness accounts, most experts admitted they were baffled. "It's extremely rare, almost unheard of," one analyst had said, "but I can't say for certain what caused it." Melissa's curiosity deepened when she interviewed members of the madrasa's congregation. They spoke of the overwhelming sense of peace they felt as they prayed. One man described how, despite the roaring flames outside, he felt a calm certainty that they would be protected. Imam Ahmad, though humble and soft-spoken, shared his perspective with unwavering conviction. "Faith is not about guarantees," he told Melissa. "It's about surrendering to the will of Allah, trusting in His wisdom, and finding peace in the storm. What happened here is not for me to explain. It is simply a reminder of the power of prayer and unity." The madrasa's untouched walls began to draw attention from more than just the locals. News outlets started picking up the story, labeling it a miracle. Social media buzzed with debates. Was it divine intervention, a scientific anomaly, or just sheer luck? For Melissa, the story was no longer just about the madrasa. It was about the deeper questions it raised. Could faith and science coexist? Was this event meant to challenge our understanding of the world? The untouched madrasa stood as a symbol of something greater, its survival inspiring awe and introspection in everyone who encountered its story. For Melissa, the more she uncovered, the more she realized that some mysteries weren't meant to be solved, they were meant to be experienced. The moment Melissa met Williams to hear his firsthand account marked the turning point in her journey to uncover the truth. Williams, a no-nonsense firefighter known for his practical and logical approach, sat across from her, his expression betraying a mix of disbelief and awe. This was a man who had spent decades battling flames and facing disasters, yet he couldn't explain what he had witnessed that night. "I've seen fires behave unpredictably before," Williams began, his voice steady but tinged with hesitation. "Wind changes, sudden flare-ups, things that defy patterns we expect. But this was different. The flames surrounded the madrasa, and it's like they stopped. They didn't leap over it, they didn't burn around it, they just stopped. I've never seen anything like it." Melissa leaned in, pressing him for more details. "Did you notice anything unusual? The air, the temperature, anything at all?" she asked, her pen poised to capture every word. Williams hesitated, as if weighing whether he should say what was on his mind. Finally, he spoke. "The heat was intense everywhere else, but near the madrasa, it was cooler. And I swear there was this presence. It's hard to describe, but it felt like we weren't alone out there, like something was watching over that building." Melissa's skepticism began to waver. She reviewed the footage captured by the fire crew's cameras. The madrasa stood defiantly amidst the fiery chaos, its silhouette sharp against the glow of the inferno. Even in the video, it seemed almost surreal, as if the building had been plucked out of time and space, untouched by the destruction surrounding it. Driven by the need to see the site herself, Melissa arranged a visit to the madrasa. She walked through the charred remains of the neighborhood, the acrid smell of smoke lingering in the air. When she reached the madrasa's gates, the contrast was staggering. The white walls gleamed under the sunlight. The trees in the courtyard were lush and green, and not a single scorch mark marred the structure. Imam Ahmad greeted her with a gentle smile, his demeanor calm and welcoming. Melissa couldn't hide her amazement as she stepped inside. The interior of the madrasa was immaculate, with books neatly arranged on shelves and prayer mats perfectly aligned. It was as if the fire had never happened. "How do you explain this?" Melissa asked, her voice almost a whisper. Imam Ahmad gestured for her to sit and took a moment before responding. "I don't have an explanation," he admitted. "I only have my faith. When the fire came close, we prayed. We surrendered ourselves to Allah's will, and He chose to protect us. It's not for us to understand, but to be grateful." Melissa looked around, taking in the serene atmosphere of the madrasa. She felt an unexpected lump in her throat, a sensation she couldn't quite place. Was it awe, disbelief, or something deeper? The turning point came when she interviewed one of the youngest members of the congregation, a boy no older than 10. His words were simple, yet profound. "I wasn't scared," and he told her. "Imam Ahmad said Allah would protect us, and He did." Melissa's logical mind struggled to reconcile the facts. There was no scientific reason the madrasa should have survived. Experts couldn't offer an explanation. Yet here it was, standing strong, a beacon of hope and resilience in the face of devastation. As she left the madrasa, Melissa paused at the gate and turned to take one last look. The building seemed to radiate a quiet strength, a reminder of the power of faith and unity. For the first time in her career, she didn't feel the need to have all the answers. Some moments, she realized, were meant to be felt, not explained. Williams, too, found himself transformed by the experience. Days later, he visited the madrasa on his own, sitting quietly in the courtyard as he reflected on what he had witnessed. For a man who had always relied on logic and facts, this event had opened a door to something he couldn't define. The madrasa's survival became the center of conversations far beyond Los Angeles. Some saw it as proof of divine power, others as an inexplicable anomaly. But no one could deny the profound impact it had on those who were there. For Melissa and Williams, it was a moment that reshaped their perspectives, leaving them with more questions than answers, but also with a newfound respect for the mysteries of life. The survival of the Islamic madrasa amidst the devastating Los Angeles wildfires became a story that transcended logic and reason. For those who witnessed it firsthand, it wasn't just a building that was spared. It was a symbol of hope, resilience, and something greater than themselves. News of the madrasa's survival spread rapidly, capturing the attention of local residents, religious communities, and the global media. Images of the untouched madrasa, standing defiantly against the backdrop of charred ruins, went viral. Social media was ablaze with debates and reactions. Some called it a miracle, a testament to the power of faith and prayer. Others sought scientific explanations, suggesting unusual weather patterns or structural factors. But no matter where people stood, one thing was undeniable. The madrasa's survival had left everyone in awe. For Imam Ahmad and his congregation, the experience was humbling. They didn't claim to fully understand what had happened, but saw it as a profound reminder of Allah's mercy and the strength of unity in times of crisis. "We prayed not to be saved, but to find peace, whatever the outcome," Imam Ahmad later said. "What happened here is not for us to explain, but to be grateful for." Melissa's coverage of the event took on a tone she hadn't anticipated. The journalist, known for her skepticism, found herself grappling with questions that went beyond her usual scope. Her article didn't just document the survival of the madrasa, it explored the human need for hope, the power of faith, and the mysteries we may never fully understand. For Melissa, this wasn't just a story, it was a personal journey that left her questioning the boundaries of logic and belief. Williams, the veteran firefighter, also found himself deeply impacted. He returned to the madrasa days after the fire, drawn by a need to make sense of what he had witnessed. Sitting quietly in the courtyard, he reflected on his years of service and the countless disasters he had faced. This one, however, stood apart. "I've seen a lot of destruction in my career," he said, "but this was something different. It's a reminder that sometimes there are forces at work that we can't explain." The madrasa's survival became more than a local event. It was a catalyst for introspection and unity. People from all walks of life visited the site, some driven by faith, others by curiosity. Communities came together to rebuild, inspired by the madrasa's resilience. The event reminded everyone that even in the darkest of times, there is room for hope and the possibility of the extraordinary. For Melissa and Williams, the madrasa became a turning point in their lives. It didn't provide all the answers they sought, but it left them with a new perspective. They learned that not every